I'm your host, Blake Collier, and on today's episode of 88 Names Podcast, Matt Ruff and I speak to HP's global head of virtual reality for location-based entertainment, Joanna Popper, about HP's own interest in the development of VR and AR. We look into what it takes to create tech for diverse peoples in various countries all around the world. We also talk about the effects of the technology on a global scale, and the intentions of the creators versus the intentions of the users, and how those things sometimes, or often, diverge. In the late 70s and early 80s, an acceleration of technology in various aspects of society and industry takes place. It is at this point we see the introduction of the wired glove in its many forms. The first version would come in 1977 at the University of Illinois at Chicago's Electronic Visualization Lab, where Daniel Sandlin, Tom DeFanti, and Rich Sayre found a way to use light sensors traveling through flexible tubes that could manipulate movement when the bending of the fingers made the light source hit the photocells on the opposite end of the tube in different spots, enacting movement in a virtual space. The glove was lightweight and simple in its mechanism, yet limited in its ability to recreate movement. In 1982, the concept was built upon by Thomas G. Zimmerman when he patented an optical flex sensor mounted on a glove to measure the precise bending of fingers. He would then join with Jaron Lanier to patent the use of ultrasonic and magnetic hand position tracking technology into the glove, creating the Power Glove and Data Glove respectively. Both types of gloves provided an increasingly precise monitoring of movement from the physical body to the virtual body's ability to maneuver items in their manufactured worlds. It wouldn't be until 1987 that the first Power Glove was available to users in their homes. It would be no surprise that the company to finally pull this off was Nintendo with their gaming Power Glove, which had the ability to move cursors on the screen, incorporated finger bending technology, resistive sensors, and buttons on the back of the glove for increased control of what technology projected onto the screen. In 1990, the Cyber Glove would be created by Virtual Technologies Inc., adding to the ever-expanding market for and improvement on the Power and Data Gloves. Perhaps the most compelling part of the story of the Virtual Glove development is how it came to be consumed by the mass public. For a time, the newness of this technology created a massive profit for companies like Nintendo and Virtual Technologies, as is the case with truly revolutionary technology today. More than the capitalist elements of these new technologies, however, was the access the enterprising owners of these gloves had to take them apart and reappropriate the mechanisms to create their own version of the glove, and in who knows how many undocumented cases, improved upon them through their own philosophies and mechanical and electrical know-how. Power Gloves and Data Gloves became in some ways an emblem of the democratization of technology. From the 1980s on, the trajectory of progress in VR would only become steeper as technology increasingly became the infatuation of modern society.
GC Records proudly sponsors this podcast. To stream or download over 20 years of music, head to gcrecords.bandcamp.com.
Hi, my name is Joanna Popper, and I am the global head of virtual reality for location-based entertainment at HP. So I work with virtual reality and many of our entertainment partners. So a little background on HP. Most people know the company, but not everyone knows it was founded 81 years ago by two founders in a garage in Palo Alto, creating technology for Walt Disney for the movie Fantasia. So we have a really long and beautiful history around technology, innovation, and entertainment and media. Since then, HP has been inventing and reinventing technology and computing, and continuously looking towards the future to see what is the what is next, and what and how can we use technology to positively impact people's lives. So, it's that original Silicon Valley story, and that original, two founders in a garage. There's been many stories like that since, but this is really the original one. And even if you go to Palo Alto today, you can still go to the garage where the two founders were first working. So it's really, really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, HP sees today the future of computing around virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, data science, 3D computing, and so or 3D printing. And so we're looking at those areas to help us build and continue to innovate and build for the future. So within that context, we work with tech companies, with content creators, with Hollywood studios, with virtual effects houses to help them create and design, develop, and experience their visions and bring their creativity to life.
So obviously one of the goals with location-based entertainments like the kind you work with is to appeal to and be accessible to as wide an audience as possible. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the physiological challenges inherent in VR technology. So, for example, motion sickness is a common enough problem that games for the Oculus headset come with a comfort rating, to let you know how strong your stomach needs to be to enjoy this. Anything from totally comfortable to you're going to be doing loop-the-loops, so you better be sure you're up for that. And there are people too who have issues with astigmatism where they get, headaches using VR. And so can you talk a little bit about like when you're trying to design a broad-based sort of theme park kind of thing, what sorts of problems you deal with like that, and how do you try to get past that so as many people as possible can enjoy this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of different factors that impact people's experience in virtual reality. And some of them are, have to do with how the content is built and the types of movement and it's like camera shots that are, depending on whether it's CG or if it's live action. So there's a lot that's under the control of the content creator and content developer. And then on the computing side, there's a lot under control as well of, the using a computer, say with a high GPU, so you don't have dropped frames or anything else that's going to take somebody out of the experience. So at HP, we have a couple of really great products. One is the HP VR G2 backpack. It's our second iteration of the VR backpack. For most people who have been to a lot of the different location-based entertainment venues, you generally strap on a backpack. If you're going to do a multiplayer, interactive, free roam experience, you'll strap on a backpack and then strap on a headset and then move around in a space with your friends and family, experiencing a really fun and exciting or adrenaline-driving game. And so our new backpacks have the highest level of graphics cards. It's RTX 2080 from NVIDIA, and so having that really powerful, high-performance computer helps minimize any negative experience. And then on the headset side, we have our HP Reverb headset, and the headset is the highest resolution headset that in the sort of mass market headset that you can get. It's 2160 by 2160 per eye, so 2x the resolution of most other headsets out there. And then we also make sure that the headset is really comfortable and ergonomic, and as well as so it's lightweight on your head, so it doesn't press down and give you, if you wear it for hours, it doesn't have that experience of pressing too hard on your head or too much weight on your head. It's only 1.1 pounds. And then it's also, it's on the Windows mixed reality system, and it's inside out tracked. So it's easy to set up. So those are a couple of things that, we have an industrial design team. We have a really strong product management team, a really strong R&D and engineering team. And, HP traditionally has been a hardware company, which is different than a lot of the other companies that are in the same space. Many of them are traditionally software companies or gaming companies and or telephone companies and making a leap into hardware, whereas HP, this is the core of our business. So we're able to tap into that knowledge base to create overall better experiences in terms of the technology. But like I said, it's a mixture of content plus technology that impact the overall experience.
D-Rooted is a proud sponsor of the 88 Names podcast.
De-Rooted, immersive experiences and interactive activations helping brands connect globally. Find case studies and more at derooted.com.
So what effects do you see of VR technology in the world, and what are trends in society and culture that you think originated in the development of that technology?
What are trends that we've seen across the world that has to do that is driving
driving it, or were kind of started by this VR development?
So some of the trends that are important in virtual reality are, and I focus a lot on our entertainment clients, but I also work across many other different categories. So the five main areas that we focus on at HP in virtual reality are location-based entertainment, training, architecture, engineering, construction, and product dev, healthcare, and education. And so we see, it's certainly training, education, and higher ed, and even some into healthcare. There's some really interesting trends around creating ROI for businesses by using virtual reality in your training. And so, if you think about any sort of corporate training you've been to, either corporate training is one example, but even any type of training that puts the person who's being trained into a situation of danger or is very far to get to and very expensive, or maybe even be a soft skill that might put somebody in an uncomfortable situation to have to do some sort of role play with another live human. All of those have a tremendous amount of upside and ROI to have the training in virtual reality. So, for example, when I said situations that might not be safe, so oil and gas, or first responders, or some type of manufacturing, or the military, putting somebody into a situation like that without the right training is very dangerous. But getting them up the learning curve by putting them in a virtual simulation of the training that prepares them, so by the time they get into the real life situation, they're well versed in what to do. Drives tremendous ROI. So that's a whole bucket that we're seeing virtual reality playing a really big role in right now. So that's one.
Oh, that's really cool. That's I didn't even really think about the nature of training in those kind of fields where danger is. There's a high risk. What about education? You mentioned that. Give us an example of that.
Wow, there's so many on the education side. So there's a company we work with called Victory VR, and they have a number of different content modules, but one of them is a frog dissection. So in the United States, 60% of states have a requirement that there has to be an opt-out option for frog dissection. So what better way to learn to dissect a frog than to do it virtually and, save the frogs.
That's awesome.
That's a really interesting idea.
So that's one. And then, there's also a medical school in Colorado at CSU that we work with. They have in the medical school, they had the cadaver lab for anatomy training, and they have 100 computers, 100 headsets where they're now training their students on human body. And again, saving costs, giving people a chance to try it again. So it's not a one-shot opportunity. And there's just so many examples like that. And then also on, there's really anything that you would think where you need to learn in a 3D spatial environment would make sense to train in virtual reality as opposed to just straight flat or 2D surface.
Yeah, it almost gives you kind of more of a hands-on approach where you're actually having to practice it.
I'm a little curious too about the current limits of realism with this. Are you talking about just sight and sound, or do you have like haptic effects as well, where you would actually, or things like if you're simulating something like firefighting, is there a way to simulate without endangering somebody, things like the heat they would feel, or the smells or stuff like that, or when they're
Yeah, you absolutely can. So, mean, there are haptic vests, there are haptic gloves, there are other types of haptics you can use for the hands. I was in an experience recently at Sundance, which was an entertainment experience, but part of it had a sensor you put on your hand that simulated that got hot and got cold. So that was part of the experience there. It was called Scarecrow, but yeah, they had it. There was a part where you're in the snow, and then they had a part where you're in a fire. So you could use that similar technology if you were, in a firefighting environment. And I've experienced that in that example in entertainment, but it's possible they're using similar things in an environment like firefighting. And then similarly, people use smell in entertainment, and certainly could you use smell as well in training, and I'm sure they are. Yeah. So, one of the first examples that I knew was The Void has an experience for Ghostbusters. They were one of the first LBEs that launched. And in the end of Ghostbuster, well, I don't want to do spoiler, but in the end, you see this Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and some stuff happens, and then it ends up smelling like marshmallow.
Yeah.
And so, so on the LBE side, the location-based entertainment side, they're borrowing from, years of knowledge and experience at theme parks, and so using all of your sense and sound. So, you could be in an experience where they have wind on you and they use smell. And then you can also use haptic vests or haptic, props or gloves that create haptics, or, many other different ways to create those different sensations.
How far are we from this kind of stuff being available in a home version? Because the haptic suits sound really interesting, but they also sound really expensive.
Yeah, I would say, well, how would I say that? The headsets certainly are available at home.
Right.
The computers are available at home, and certain props, you certainly could get for home. It's just whether or not you definitely could. It's whether, but some of them right now, in terms of where the companies and the industry is focused, for some of them, it just makes more sense in an enterprise environment because there's going to be a larger business right now.
No, and I know that a lot of the kinds of games you download for the Oculus, for example, they're not going to program in haptic, advanced haptics anyway. But I was just curious if that's something that is likely in the near term or the far term to be available at home, or is it in terms of just the pricing, or are they not even looking at that yet?
I would say, something like haptic vests, there definitely are companies that are targeting gamers. So that's absolutely available at home. And so where you're playing a game and either you feel a beat of music while you're playing, a sort of, it's one type of game, or if you're playing a game where there's a shootout or something, a first-person shooter or something like that, you might feel those sensations on the haptic vest.
So yeah, obviously my novel is a sort of a cyber thriller adventure. So the protagonist is hired by this anonymous wealthy individual to give him a comprehensive online tour of the world of VR gaming. And as the tour gets underway, he begins to suspect that this wealthy benefactor is actually North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, who's interested in VR technology more as a propaganda tool, as a way of pacifying his own subjects. And that's obviously a very fantastical and extreme example, but I'm wondering if there are potentially negative uses of VR technology that you would be worried about, or is that just not something you consider?
I would say with every technology, I would imagine the creators of the technology are creating the technology for for a higher purpose of democratization, to give people the ability to create more, to live out their dreams, to imagine more, to connect, communicate, and enhance their humanity and live into their superpowers. So I would say that is the intention when most technology is created. Now, how the technology ends up getting used is, there's different elements, and it kind of depends on who ends up using it and for what purpose. So I think that certainly the intention of the creation of the technology is certainly to make the world a better place and to use technology for positive impact in the world. But I think it's always good to be conscious about things like privacy and data, and just make sure that each individual who's using it is very responsible around security. These are all things that we at HP take very seriously, because we work with enterprises, governments, organizations all over the world whose data is incredibly valuable. And so we, for us, this is core to a part of our business. But it's, I think, for any enterprise or any consumer, it's always important to make sure that you're working with partners who care deeply and share your values around these issues.
Yeah.
Are there legal issues you get into with different countries in terms of, are there just some countries more controlling or limiting on what they will let you do?
We haven't had, HP operates in hundreds of countries around the world. So I know that, certain tech companies have had issues with certain countries, but to my knowledge, we haven't had any issues like that.
Okay.
How are businesses addressing the use of VR products? We are seeing a technology in social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Google and Amazon and others struggling to address abuse of those platforms. Are VR companies learning any lessons from that, and what should they take away from it?
I would say it's still pretty early. In terms of, I think the medium is still pretty early. There definitely are groups that are very deeply thinking about the ethics of virtual reality, the ethics around privacy, ethics around use, around children. There's lots of universities and groups studying all of these important issues. And I would say, and certainly trying to make sure that this wave of computing takes all the positive lessons from the current wave and takes those positive lessons forward.
Wonderful.
One hopes.
Yeah, exactly. How do you find culture like Matt's novel, for instance, 88 Names, shaping the development and use of the technology like VR and AR?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's certain books that in the virtual reality world that have definitely shaped some people's either desire to work in the field or, shaped the vision of what that future might look like. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, I worked in television for a long time. And as I worked, media and entertainment prior. I was at NBCUniversal for a long time and Telemundo prior to coming to HP. And so I believe deeply that our media and entertainment shapes our view of the world, our view of ourselves, our view of other people, our sense of belonging, our sense of imagination. And so I think there's important books, there's important movies, there's important news programming that has helped to develop for the world what virtual reality and other technologies are and will be, that has driven people to imagine bigger and to create bigger and to continue to move the industry forward.
Do you have any personal favorites among like books or TV series or movies that you've seen that have sort of inspired you personally in the industry?
Well, some of I think some of the books that people cite often or the content experiences are Ready Player One, Snow Crash, Minority Report. And so some of those, very much take place in a dystopian world. And so
Minority Report, really? That's interesting.
Well, Ready Player One is a dystopian world where people come into virtual reality to escape the world. So my hope is that the use of virtual reality is not driven by the dystopian landscape that we have around us, but that the world is a great and inspiring place, but that virtual reality continues to enhance the positive experience that we have in the world.
And so finally, you just always like to look ahead a little bit. Looking ahead in the next 5 or 10 years, Is there anything especially cool on the horizon in VR technology that maybe, or the AR technology that maybe not a lot of civilians know about yet, but that you think will be especially a big deal or especially interesting?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'm really excited about. So we're looking deeply at bioanalytics. So having a two-way conversation with the person who's using the technology and the technology. So we think there's a lot of really positive experiences that are going to come in that side. And then
I'm sorry, what's bioanalytics?
It would be, when you're in the headset and the headset is able to know about, how's your cognitive load or how is your emotional state. It's using additional sensors and tracking of the bioanalytics to understand and help shape your experience.
Okay.
So that's something we're working on, and we see there will be a great future there. And then more broadly, our company, as well as pretty much every other big tech company, believes that the next wave of computing will be some form of smart glasses. And so that there'll be an era where it's less about, staring at your phone block and more about, having the information live on your head in the form of a smart glass, either connected to a computer or to a phone or potential or to the cloud, connected in some way. But that is the next wave. And so in a broader sense, I'm super, super excited for that wave to become reality.
All right. Well, thank you very much then. That's an interesting something to think about. And again, as a novelist, I could do some interesting dystopian things with that as well. But I have to admit, I want those.
Don't do it.
But I do want those glasses too. So it's always a double-edged sword that way.
That is it for this episode of 88 Names Podcast. We will be back next Friday with a new episode. If you like the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts and give us a rating and review, which will help us get more listeners. Remember to check back at the podcast site at riseupdaily.com/88namespodcast for the podcast introduction and upcoming written interviews and articles. We would like to thank Threaded Zebra Agency, Altspace VR, D-Rooted, and Creative Mornings for their support and work on this podcast. We will see you soon.